Welcome to BioBytes. Today we have Jason Cole with us, who is a strategic biotech CEO, four-time public company executive leadership team member, qualified financial expert, and board member with nearly 25 years of experience with public and private biotech boards and committees. Currently at SalioGen as their CEO and scaling that organization. Previously with Bluebird Bio, Zalkius, and currently also a board member at Mass Bio. Really excited to dive into this one. I think Jason's on an incredible journey at the moment with tons of fantastic work going on in the company, and looking forward to diving into this and giving back to the audience. So, Jason, if you wouldn't mind kindly giving us a quick intro on some of your career moves today that have led to the success that you've had, that would be fantastic.
Yeah, Shakir, and thanks for having me on the podcast. I really enjoy listening to them, so it's going to be great to be a part of one and just sort of share some of my learnings over time, for sure. So my journey to being a biotech CEO is kind of unconventional. So I'm a corporate lawyer by training, and I started my career at Ropes and Gray, which is a global law firm largely based here in Boston, and I that's really when I got my first exposure to life sciences. So I was working there on IPOs and venture financings, and I realized that everyone having fun was on the other side of the table. They were the clients, right? And they were these cross-functional teams of scientists and physicians and business people really working on these incredible missions to, find therapies for patients who don't have a therapy. And I felt really fortunate to be able to work with those companies as clients. And then after about 6.5 years at the law firm, I joined one. So a company called Combinatorics was a client who I'd helped take public. And their CEO and CFO asked me to join their executive team as general counsel. And so that was my first step into being on an executive team at a public company and really learning about managing people and how to be a collaborator on a cross-functional team. And it was a lot of fun. I mean, I was so glad to have sort of joined biotech as my sort of field, which was exciting. And then that began a theme which really has played out over my career about sort of adding other responsibilities beyond the sort of legal side. And so I started, managing the IT team and the facilities team. Not sexy, but, important sort of operational groups. And that was sort of the beginning of sort of the diversity of experiences I started to have in biotech. And so Combinatorics was a fun ride. Unfortunately, it didn't play out well in the clinic. And we ended up doing a merger of equals transaction with this company based in Canada, which was working on non-opioid therapies for pain, a company called Zalkius. And that's an area that, Vertex has actually been generating some interesting data in now with these NAV 1.8 blockers. And so in that transaction, which I, took the lead in negotiating, I was basically the only surviving executive team member. And so we had a new executive team going after a new business strategy. And there I deepened the side of me on the business side. So I took over corporate development, worked with a team that was negotiating a bunch of kind of big pharma collaborations using one of our platform technologies. And that really sort of deepened my engagement with the business side of biotech beyond just the legal side. So also another fun run with a lot of really good people. Also, biotech is cruel, so our therapies did not pan out in the clinic either. And so that allowed me to make the leap to Bluebird Bio and really be on the ground floor of the first generation of gene therapies, and with the lentiviral ex vivo gene therapies. And Bluebird is just an amazing organization to join and be a part of for over 8.5 years. And during that period of time, I went from, I'll call it like minoring in business stuff to basically majoring in being a business person. And so during my time at Bluebird, we scaled from 100 people to 1,200 people, opening, commercial operations in Europe and acquiring manufacturing plants and gene editing companies and doing all this stuff. And over the course of that period of time, I kept sort of reinforcing and learning the skills of being just a collaborator who can execute, and just being part of these teams that would be given significant strategic tasks to implement or drive. And so over time, I ended up taking on COO responsibilities at Bluebird. And then we faced a real strategic challenge as a company where we had under one roof a rare disease gene therapy business and a CAR T business, both of which were bringing programs to the marketplace, right? And the strategic drivers and the financial needs and the staffing needs and everything related to those two businesses were becoming increasingly divergent. And so as a company, we decided to split the company in two. And so I spent 9.5 months of my life basically giving birth to these two public biotech companies, one focused on rare disease and one focused on oncology. And I was responsible for the transactional and operational aspects of that split. But at the end of that split, I decided to stay with Bluebird in the rare disease business and sort of shed all my legal responsibilities. And that allowed me to become the chief business officer, where I was focused on business development, strategy, portfolio program management, communications, all of that stuff. And then soon after the split, I also had to take on the CFO responsibilities as well. And I was really proud of our team after the split, navigating some pretty choppy waters in the capital markets, with regulators, et cetera, to get our first two gene therapies approved, back in 2022. And I was just so proud of all of that. But then after those two approvals, having done, I think, all the jobs I was qualified for, really, within a biotech, I wanted to see if I could lead an organization myself. And so that led to a search to find a technology and a team that could really make an impact for patients. And that's how I found SalioGen, right? So really excited to have been able to stay in the genetic medicine space. And so SalioGen has a really interesting technology where we're one of a handful of companies at the forefront of what's next for genetic medicine. And so we're developing some non-viral in vivo therapies in areas like Stargardt's disease, where there's currently no therapy. And so I'm really excited to apply all the learnings from that whole, nonlinear journey to really build a company that's focused on patients and having a real impact in, retinal diseases and ideally cystic fibrosis next. So it's been a fun ride, and it's not over.
Yeah, amazing. And Jason, did you, throughout that period of time when you first started as kind of on the legal side of things and almost consulting for these biotech companies, did you ever think that one day you'd be running an organization and growing that ground up with such an exciting brand like SalioGen?
No, I mean, I think my career path has not been premeditated. I think it
Yeah.
has been thoughtful, right? In terms of, I'm attracted to, the purpose of biotech organizations, right? The impact we can have for patients and families. I'm attracted to the collaborative nature of the work. So I think I was just able to put myself in situations with good people trying to solve some pretty big, ambitious sort of medical and biological goals, and then just sort of followed my skills and my competencies. And along the way, I think I had some really good CEOs and board members who believed in my talent and encouraged me to swim outside my lane. Because often, lawyers, in-house, et cetera, have a reputation of being, over focused on the risk, right? Or, the Department of No. And I always tried to be on the legal side of things, very thoughtful about the business opportunities and how to manage the risks while we pursue those opportunities. So, yeah, it wasn't a straight line, but I'm really pleased about how the career's played out so far.
Yeah, fantastic. And I mean, prior to SalioGen, I mean, joining Bluebird at, you mentioned 100 people and scaling that to 1,200 globally. I mean, that's an incredible journey. And Bluebird's been one of those really successful brands, not just from, I think, the amazing science that it's involved in and treating unmet medical needs, but
Mhm.
equally, I think the culture, and that's always a really hard thing to maintain when
Yeah.
you're scaling at such a fast rate. And from this side of the fence, understanding the whispers of the industry and the reputation that company had, it was
Mhm.
always incredibly positive. So excited to understand, when building a biotech, whether it was Bluebird or now with SalioGen, um from building that from ground up, what are the most successful characteristics and attributes that you strive for and look out for when scaling an operation like that globally and across different disciplines?
Sure. So I think you already touched on it. I think there is a real importance to creating and fostering a shared culture around what kind of company you want to be, right? And I think Bluebird's reputation as a leader and having that strong culture is well earned. Some of the best people I've ever worked with in my life are come from Bluebird, and now a lot of us are part of a diaspora where we work at different companies, and it's fun to watch how that's played out over time. But the way I've applied that at SalioGen is to really, do a sort of bottoms up approach or grassroots approach to defining the company's values, right? And what, our company believes, right, are important to us to be successful. Because I don't think, a set of values is like a top down sort of dictation, right? Where it's like, this is how we need to work. I think a role of a leader like myself or other executives is to set, a vision and a mission and to get people's head around, what we want to be. But then, a company is a little like society, right? And so you have a culture whether you design it or not. And so I think it's important to have a dialogue at all levels of the company around what that culture is. And then once you articulate it, to really reinforce it, communicate it, reward people for operating consistently with the culture and values, to incent people to change if they do not operate consistent with those values. Because what we do is so hard, in biotech. And so those environmental factors, feeling, comfortable at work, feeling valued, feeling that you can make a real contribution, that's so key to success in this field for sure.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? I think in a space like biotech, as you mentioned, it's incredibly hard to get drugs to market. And regardless of which life cycle or kind of stage of the process that they're in, it's incredibly tough for anybody who's involved. And I think there's certain things that you can control, and it's things like culture and, do people enjoy coming in? Are they aligned with the mission? And as leadership, I think as you rightly pointed out, those are the things that you've got to grasp and really direct and make sure folks are on the ship for the right reasons and on the bus, right? And the stronger people you get on, ultimately gets you closer to the goal, which is impacting patients. And I think from your experience, what two pieces of advice, Jason, would you share for folks that are listening as a seasoned executive leader?
Sure. So I think in terms of just like your own kind of career paths, I think one is to just continually deliver in your sort of area of responsibility, right? And, demonstrate a collaborative mindset, right? So, biotech is a team sport, or, for my daughter who, is into theater, it is a collaborative theater production, right? It takes a team to be successful. And so just your internal reputation about being collaborative and delivering is the foundation for your career success. And then from there, you just have to raise your hand for opportunities. I think a lot of my career progress and advancement has been a bit opportunistic, right? Somebody will leave or get fired, or there will be this opportunity to take on new responsibilities, or there'll be a project that is complicated that the board or the CEO needs done. And in almost all circumstances in my career, it's been, well, I'll do that. And I was not really restrained by lack of experience in the relevant area. I mean, it's always easier if it's adjacent, right? So, I'm a like transactions person. So if there's a transactional element, that's helpful. But I do think a lot of folks just need to think about the problems their boss or boards are trying to solve. And sometimes in a period of change, they're thinking, oh my gosh, how am I going to do this? Who's going to do this? I can't do this, right? And so being somebody who fills those voids and has this reputation of execution and collaboration, you will be pulled up and over and around into different areas that may really help, advance your career. And I definitely want to encourage, I think some, like women are often, unwilling to sort of go for those reach opportunities. And I just want to encourage, women in the biotech workforce to not let imposter syndrome get to them, right? And to, also, reach for those opportunities boldly because they're out there.
And how do you foster a culture of innovation and collaboration within your organizations?
Yeah, it's a great question. So, focusing on the collaboration side of things, it does start with the culture and the values, as we discussed earlier, right? You have to have a shared commitment that we are a collaborative organization, and then, but you also have to teach it, and you also have to structure your company in a way such that collaboration is easier, right, and also rewarded. And so that's not, immediate, right? I think part of, leaders like myself, you come into pre-existing organizations, right? So if you haven't started it yourself, you're coming into something that has its own sort of existing approach. And so, the way I think about it is really reinforcing that teams are how we work, right? And so I'm a big fan of we pronouns, not I pronouns. And so getting people in a mindset of, okay, here's a challenge, here's an opportunity, what team is going to solve it? And so if you're constantly using the language of teams, and if you're spending some of your like learning and development time with employees on, collaborative sort of language and tools, that helps people sort of move toward that day-to-day practice of being collaborative. And, old habits die hard for folks and cultures. But again, for someone like myself, the tone at the top you have to set is one of collaboration is the way to go. This is how we succeed, and then rewarding and acknowledging folks who are really good at bringing different perspectives together to solve what's pretty hard in terms of developing drugs.
And I always say biotech's full of ups and downs and highs and lows, which makes it incredibly rewarding, but also challenging at times. And taking that in your own, your own step. And could you share some major setbacks and or war scars that you faced throughout your career in leadership within biotech, Jason?
I can, yeah. And anyone who's been in this industry for any length of time has their own, spectacular, challenges and failures that they've encountered. And as you said, I think that is why it's such a fun place to work, right? We make these bold bets for patients and for society, really, to see if we can bring innovative technologies and turn them into therapies. And so that is, just amazing work, but it is fraught with risk, some of which is in your control and some of which is completely out of your control. And so, some of the, failures or setbacks I've encountered in my career actually go more hand in hand with sort of resourcing, right? And like overbuilding or, not fully sort of appreciating the reality of, say, timelines or the size of opportunities. And then, sadly, because of my like legal and operations background, I've spent, chunks of my career, breaking things down and selling them off right after them not necessarily meeting the ambition of what you thought it would be. So I think there's a real balance you have to strike around that sort of incredible ambition that you need to have to be successful in biotech with what I'll call fiscal or operational discipline, right? And so for me, that means staying focused. I think companies can overbuild if they don't ruthlessly prioritize what they're good at and what the biggest opportunities are. And so that it starts with, just having a focus that doesn't lead to overbuilding or bad resource allocation. And then beyond that, I think it's important to really have meaningful gates or milestones as you think about progressing your programs. You're never going to save your way to success in this industry, but being really thoughtful about this program has the following steps to be what we hope it can be. Let's invest to get to that next step, and then have a really tight plan that says once we cross that threshold, that gate, you execute on that next sort of set of resources. And that approach, has some pain points perhaps with the people working on it, because working in an under-resourced environment can be challenging in its own right. But I think it's something that leaders need to figure out, is that resourcing, because there's nothing more painful than telling really good people you've hired and brought together that it's not going to work out, and we have to say goodbye. And if that's because of something other than clinical data or biology, that's a self-inflicted wound, right? And so that's what I've tried to learn from the setbacks that I've encountered in my career, plus the successes, right? So it's always a balance.
In your experience, Jason, what key strategies for building and maintaining strong relationships would you highlight when you're working with key stakeholders such as investors, regulatory bodies, and healthcare providers?
Yeah, so this is something I've learned kind of more recently in my career, as I've had to take on sort of more outward facing roles and thinking about all those different stakeholders. I think it starts with prioritization, right? Figuring out for your phase of your company or your programs who are the most critical stakeholders, and then developing just plans around those stakeholders. And I think sometimes, right, we have muscle memory or areas where it's like, oh yeah, the most important stakeholder is, I don't know, business development or investors. And it depends on where you are as a company, whether those are more important than regulators, physicians, patients, you name it, right? So I think having a really thoughtful assessment of what stakeholders sort of are most critical for where you are is where it begins. And then I think it's also important to think about, when you're engaging with folks like that, for it to always be a two-way conversation. So I think it's important for companies that are developing therapies for, patient communities and healthcare providers to approach those conversations with, a learning mindset and a listening mindset. I think people like me, because we have to tell our company's story so often to so many different stakeholders, sometimes can monologue it, right? And just be like, hi, let me tell you about our strategy and our programs, and just like dump on somebody. And you have to really strike another balance of how you tell your story, how you tell the strategy, but then make sure you're listening to the perspectives of the stakeholder you're talking to, because there's so much to be learned from their perspectives. And again, like you think about physicians who are treating patients now in spaces you might be trying to develop a therapy. They are on the front lines of, delivering whatever exists now as a standard of care. And then also, of course, listening to patients about their experiences, their journeys, what, they're looking for in terms of a change. And so with those two constituencies in particular, it's really important to approach with real humility, because I think another thing that can happen, especially as smaller companies, is you show up every day, working on your strategy and your tactics and your execution, and you can lose sight of the outside world and the different perspectives on what you're doing. And so it's really important to listen to those stakeholders and then bring that back in. Because at a small company, like you think about a regulatory strategy, there might be a couple people in your company thinking about your regulatory strategy. And are you, bringing in an outside in perspective? And you can only bring that perspective in if you engage and if you listen, as opposed to kind of dictate how you want it to be. And so that's part of the, I guess, art of the science of biotech to just figure out the people side of it. And it's something I really like to do. But I gotta, you gotta practice the two ears, one mouth philosophy sometimes.
And what advice would you give to emerging biotech entrepreneurs who are looking to navigate the challenges of scaling their companies, but also continuing to attract investment?
Yeah, so I think it starts with being really clear-eyed around differentiation of your, technology platform or your products, your programs. I think that discipline is critical to all number of areas of success. So I'm a big fan of focus, and I think that focus has to be a mix of understanding how your approach is differentiated, from a biological perspective, from a patient perspective, and from a, let's call it, competitive perspective, right? What else is out there? And I've heard people phrase this in a way that I really like is, what problem in the world or what opportunity is our company uniquely existing to solve? And if you can't answer that question, or if the answer to that question is really difficult, you might want to think about a different strategy, right? Because in biotech, once like targets or other kind of biology gets validated, everyone crowds in, right? And it might be large companies with huge resources. It might be very nimble kind of startup companies like a SalioGen. And so really making sure that what you're doing is differentiated is key to attract capital, attract employees, attract business development interest, to drive engagement with physicians, regulators, you name it. And so I think we're in an incredible time in biotechnology. Just so much continuing innovation is coming from, academia and companies. Like we are really making headway for humanity on addressing diseases that have no therapy, or bringing sort of one-time interventions for diseases that have these chronic therapies that are very expensive and people are taking for years. And so there's so much opportunity out there, but not every company needs to go after every opportunity. And that sort of real discipline, including outside in perspectives, you've got to do that to focus.
And Jason, what are you most excited about with SalioGen in the near term and long term while you're building out the company?
Oh yeah, so I think we have a lot of things to be excited about. I think as I mentioned earlier, everyone's familiar with the progress and the promise of the kind of first and second generation, genetic medicine technologies. We have our first approved CRISPR therapy, but what's important is with these new modalities, there are limitations, right? And SalioGen has a technology that really overcomes a lot of the limitations of those first and second generation technologies. What's great is we can put, large genes in specific places more safely than other technologies. And Stargardt's disease, which is our lead program, is actually an ideal application of our technology because it's a large gene that we've been able to now successfully deliver using a proprietary nanoparticle to the retina and now move that into the clinic. And so others have really struggled to bring a genetic medicine to Stargardt's. And I think where others have struggled are the exact reasons why we have a chance to succeed. And so that's going to be a great opportunity to validate our technology for the benefit of patients where there is no approved therapy at all. And so that's the kind of like mission that gets me really excited and makes me want to come to work every day. And what's exciting is we have the opportunity to then go beyond Stargardt's into a bunch of other really important retinal diseases. And then to also sort of take that same research playbook and innovate with our enzymes and novel delivery to try to develop a one-time, curative therapy for cystic fibrosis for all patients, regardless of their genotype. And so it's that kind of big, ambitious goal that is really the backbone of biotechnology. But as a company, right, we arrived at sort of Stargardt's and retinal diseases and CF as our priority areas because we are uniquely differentiated with our technology compared to what else is out there. And there's a lot out there, right? I think the genetic medicine revolution is something I've been a part of and I'm very excited about. And there'll be a lot of winners. It's not a winner take all sort of world. And ultimately, we want the patients to be the winners, right? To have a number of new therapeutic options that they can explore with their physicians. So I'm so happy to be at this company and to be at this sort of pivotal point where we are now making the transition to a development stage company.
That's fantastic and really exciting stuff. And looking forward to continuing to see the progression over at SalioGen. Jason, I want to say a huge thank you for coming on today. Tons of value add back there to the listeners. And I hope it was enjoyable.
It was very enjoyable. Thanks for your time and the great questions. I love conversations about leadership and this sort of stuff. So I appreciate it.
Amazing.